So hello guys, I wanted to start trying a new type of video, which is basically off the cuff talking by myself about media in general, media coverage, anything to do with media. I'll try to keep any political views out of it best I can. I want to just focus on media. And today I wanted to talk about the biggest news in the world right now, which is the Russia-Ukraine conflict that's happening now. I wanted to look at the media coverage of this. I'm going to start by talking about Russian media, and then I'm going to look at Western media coverage, which is very different. And finally, I'm going to look at the new media landscape that we live in terms of misinformation and the future of war. The Russian media coverage has been very different to Western media coverage. The images that are put forward by the Russian state media have a kind of a sense of orderliness and that things are kind of going to plan. You'll see images of tanks sort of rolling past. You'll see soldiers kind of marching forward. Everything looks like it's going to plan. What is not present in Russian media are the missiles hitting residential buildings, children crying, people being killed. None of this is present in Russian media. Also, on Russian media, you're actually not allowed to use the word war. So if you're a Russian media outlet, you have to use the words or the phrase special operations, which kind of just goes to show the power of language. Now, to me, it's very difficult to understand whether this is a good tactic by the Russian government or if this is going to really backfire on them. Yes, changing the words from war to special operations, it changes the feel of what is happening. The term special operations feels a lot more kind of routine. You know, it takes all of the humanness, the humanity out of what is happening. The word war conjures in your mind thoughts of death, civilians being killed, bad things happening. Special operations, it sounds, like something that could happen to your car. Or, it sounds like everything is under control by the government, right? However, this may be backfiring. When you're trying to convince people with media, there is a sort of line that you cannot cross in terms of just how blatantly obvious what you're trying to do is. When you're trying to manipulate the minds of people, you cannot be that obvious about it because people will become very suspicious. And I would say it's pretty clear to the Russian people what the government is trying to do when they're trying to limit their language like that and trying to stop them using the word war. It's the kind of thing that is probably going to backfire on the government. The other thing that is really lacking from Russian state media is the coverage of the protests, anti-war protests inside Russia. To people in Russia, generally the older generation who are not connected to social media, which, by the way, there's a surprising number of people who just watch TV even today. These people are likely almost completely unaware of the anti-war protests that have happened in all Russian cities and also the scale of them. So it just goes to show that in many cases, if the media doesn't cover something that is happening, then to most people, it basically never happened. Despite the fact that there are thousands and thousands of people protesting in the middle of Moscow, a lot of people in Russia will have no idea this event even occurred. A lot of people in Russia probably believe that most of the country is for the war. Any media coverage of anti-war sentiment has basically just had a complete blackout on it and has just not been shown whatsoever. So then let's move on to the Western media coverage of this war. It's been quite interesting and kind of quite strange, honestly, to finally see a war kind of shown without a filter. Finally, we're actually able to see a war like in very stark reality. Because, of course, most of the other wars in the last 20 years or 30 years have been kind of American wars, or at least wars coming from the West. I'm talking about Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and all this kind of thing. So with those wars, again, it was exactly the same thing on the other side. Any footage of children dying, innocent people being killed, people crying, death, anything like that, that was never shown to us on Western media. Not really on the BBC, not on CNN, that's for sure. So it just goes to show that really the state media or the mainstream media is very much controlled by the government in that country. And this is more or less the case for every country in the world. What is very interesting is how everyone tends to choose the side that their government is on. So basically everybody in Western countries like UK, US, Canada, France. Basically, everybody is against the war and they are massively for the Ukraine. In fact, we have a huge, stupid movement of people on social media who are, putting the Ukraine flag on their profile pictures, and a lot of people are using the Ukraine issue to actually just gain followers for their social media site, which is just, well, what can you expect? But what is interesting is actually I have a job as an online English teacher, which allows me to actually speak to people from all over the world. That allows me to get a pretty unique perspective on events that are happening in the world and what people from different countries think. Now, I have two students that I've spoken to about the Ukraine-Russian war. One was from China. Now, she was not for the war, just like the Chinese government is not for the war. But the way she spoke about the war was not that it was a terrible tragedy or a horrible thing, which is what most people from most countries in the world would say is there's a horrible tragedy. In fact, if you're from a Western country, you're probably anti. You probably think that Putin is a terrible person. But she did not speak about it in that way. She was basically focusing on the economic costs that could come from the war, especially to people in China. She spoke about as she spoke about the war, the main topic she had was that the stock markets were going to be affected in China, which again is likely basically what the Chinese state media is putting out to their people. The other student I was speaking to was actually from Saudi Arabia. I'm not exactly sure about the geopolitical situation, but Saudi Arabia has a bit of a strange relationship with Russia. I couldn't tell you exactly why, something about oil and energy. Okay. But the woman I spoke to from Saudi Arabia says that she was for the war in Russia and that Putin was justified in doing this, which is pretty reflective of the position of Saudi Arabia, the government. Now, the final thing I wanted to talk about is this strange new reality that we kind of seem to be in terms of like misinformation and not really knowing exactly what reality is anymore. I don't know about you, but as I've been watching this coverage of the Ukraine conflict, I have this doubt in my mind all the time about any time I see a post on social media or a video or a picture, this doubt that whether what I'm actually looking at is actually real. It's becoming harder and harder to actually be sure what you're looking at is a real thing, if it's actually reflective of reality. I mean, just take the Snake Island incident, for example. In case you hadn't heard about this, near the beginning of the war, there was an island off the coast of Ukraine called Snake Island, and the Russian military surrounded it and asked them to surrender. And the people on the island basically told the Russian army to F off, basically. It was reported on social media that Russia had bombed that island and killed everybody who was there. And when I saw that post, I just immediately assumed it was true, to be honest. I didn't really second guess that whatsoever. However, a few days later, it turns out that nobody on the island was actually killed. They were just arrested by the Russian army. So that's just one small example of just how it's incredibly difficult to find what is actually reality or not, especially in the middle of war, in the fog of war, as they say. Another great example of this was a video of a woman. Now, she was in Red Square in the middle of Moscow, right? The famous Red Square in Moscow. You can see the Red Square in the background of the video. And what she does is she holds up a sign. I think the sign says the words, 2 words in it. And she immediately gets arrested for this. The police take her away absolutely immediately. And what's even stranger is that after that, another woman comes and starts speaking to the camera. And she is actually talking about how she's about to start talking about how she's for the war and that she agrees with Putin. But as soon as she starts the interview, the police also arrest her and take her into the van as well. This is quite a shocking video, really. But my point is that in the comments underneath the video on Twitter, people were doubting the video. They were saying, is this propaganda? Isn't this an anti-Russian propaganda? Despite the fact that it was filmed in Red Square in the center of Moscow, you can see the Red Square in the background. So their idea is that the whole scene was actually staged by some kind of propaganda media team in the middle of Red Square in Moscow, which is completely impossible. And yet people are still kind of questioning what they're seeing. We're already beginning to see that people cannot just look at something and know that it's fact. People are not sure already of what they're seeing is actually true. And this is happening all through the war. I mean, I have doubts about if I see an interview with a Ukrainian person inside Ukraine who is like a woman who is crying about her children, I'm immediately thinking to myself, well, is this a hand-picked woman? Is this some kind of just hand-picked woman who they've chosen that for on purpose to show that the Ukrainians are against Russian invasion? It's just one woman. I mean, you could easily choose another Ukrainian, even if they might be quite rare. There are a few Ukrainians, I'm sure, that are for the war in Russia. So if you just found one of those people and you interviewed them, and you interviewed the Ukrainian who was celebrating the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you could put that on Russian state media, and then you could give the impression, the absolute opposite impression, that the Ukrainians are for the war. I just find myself, every time I look at anything to do with this war, I just end up thinking, I can't feel like I can trust any media source that I actually have. I don't trust Western media sources, and I certainly don't trust Russian media sources. It's becoming very, very strange and very, very difficult to find what is reality, especially in war. Now, this is only going to get worse in the future because we are soon, in the next few years, going to have to deal with the existence of deepfakes and synthetic media. Because technology is improving, pretty soon, it's going to be able to create any kind of synthetic media that you want. You can, for example, you could make a video of Joe Biden proclaiming that he was going to send a nuclear missile to China, let's say. You can take his voice using a program called Adobe Voco. You can take his voice, piece it together, and make it sound like Joe Biden said those words. You can also use deepfake technology on his face to make it look like his lips are moving and saying those words as well. You can create anything, right? So I think what we don't realize is that at the moment, at this time, we believe videos that we see. Video is still something that can't be faked, but it won't be long before that is also able to be faked. Now, what this does is that it gives dictators what I would call informational cover to do whatever the hell they want. It gives them plausible deniability because if, let's say, the Russian army is caught doing an atrocity, killing, like, say, shooting 10 innocent civilians in the back, let's say, in the future, the Russian presidents will simply be able to claim that that is synthetic media and that that never happened. You'll be able to claim that anything that happened actually never happened. And that's the future. And that's why I believe war is going to become more and more likely, because dictators will be able to get away with more, because they will have informational cover, and people will not, the general public will begin to have the sense that they just have no idea what's going on, and you just can't possibly know what's happening in the world because there's too much fake news and synthetic media. So anyway, that's going to be the end of my discussion on Ukraine-Russian conflict. So I hope you enjoyed this kind of different kind of video. I might do a few more like this. I know that the algorithms like it when I post a lot of content, so I might have to start doing it like this. Anyway, see you later. Bye-bye.